what I wanted to focus on was two elements of the inspection process that are rising in prominence. The first is the issue of work scrutiny. It is certainly the case now that Ofsted will be paying as much attention to evidence of progress in the children's workbooks as they are to the classic lesson observation. And this, I think, will trigger quite a large shift in performance management and other issues across the school. This has arisen from the conflict over teaching styles. There's been a long debate for a few years on whether Ofsted inspectors have a preferred teaching style or not. Do they expect lots of activity and active learning and engagement? Are they comfortable with direct instruction and the teacher at the front speaking to children? And Sir Michael Wilshaw has long favoured a more traditional approach of direct instruction. He's worried that many of his inspectors quite like the active learning approach to it. So they have ruled that Ofsted has no preferred teaching style now. Now, I don't know, for those of you who've been inspected recently, whether that's filtered down to every inspection team or not. And of course, that is one of the main criticisms of Ofsted, that it doesn't matter what Sir Michael Wilshaw says, you never quite know what the team who turns up is going to be looking for. But the question is, if you have no preferred teaching style, what is it that you're actually observing when you go into a lesson? And I think this is an important question, not just from an Ofsted point of view, but from a general school lesson observation and peer observation point of view. Because if you're not looking at the teaching, you have to be looking at the learning. And that makes perfect sense to me. The trouble is that a large chunk of learning is invisible, because it's what's going on inside the children's heads. Where is the visible evidence of learning when you're sitting there as a passive observer of the lesson? And what I think we'll be doing over the next few years is shifting away from passive lesson observation to active engagement with the children. So that in effect, the observation becomes a form of assessment in its own right. It will be about talking to the children about what they've learned. It will be about looking at the books, seeing the progress over time, which I'll return to again in a minute. And it will be other forms of engaging with what's going on. Now, in general, I can see that to be a fairly positive move. I think it is more important about what the outcomes are in a lesson rather than what the inputs are. But it will have further implications. One of those is that if we are worried that Ofsted is going to be looking at all of our books, will we see a sudden increase in the volume of marking going on in schools at the moment? Well, I think the answer to that is yes. I think the answer is we have already seen quite an increase in the volume of marking. If you follow Twitter, there's a major debate going on at the moment that, to make sure that books are covered in red ink and other forms like that. Although apparently Nick Clegg has a problem with multicoloured marking as well. I don't know if you saw that. When he announced this workload challenge, one of the examples of unnecessary workload he gave was teachers using different coloured pens to mark the work. Now, I'm not sure how much effort it is to pick up a pen and put it down again at different times on that. If that's the only example of unnecessary workload they can find, I'm a little bit worried about that. I'm also worried that this is a matter for the individual school, not for Nick Clegg to be talking about. And I know some schools have colour-coded feedback schemes, which are very useful to children to enable them to focus on stuff. It's another example of politicians coming in with in a clumsy fashion and just picking up on the surface level. But I do worry about a massive increase in marking to show this. And I think we need to take a stand now, which is to say assessment and feedback to children is good. Marking is only one form of providing that, and in many ways it's one of the weakest forms of providing valuable assessment. For many children, it's the feedback they get right there and then in the lesson that triggers better learning and helps them reflect on it, not stuff done later. Because if we are talking about workload, it seems to me that it's all the books taken home in the evenings and at the weekends, which is the major cause of unsustainable workload for teachers. So we've got to find ways to focus on assessment and not on marking as part of that. There's lots that you can do as individuals and as senior leaders to make sure that's the case in the school. I know there's an outstanding school down in Essex I'm going to in a week or two, which claims to have abandoned all distance marking whatsoever within there. It's a primary school. Distance marking they define as the stuff taken away from the lesson to be done at other periods of time. So I'm going to sit down to see if that's true, because it will be very interesting, and how they do it instead. If it is true, I will do a case study on it and share it with everybody as well, because I think it could be quite a fascinating finding, and it is an outstanding school as well. Whether it's outstanding because Ofsted haven't yet come in and looked at the books without any marking in them is another matter. There's a certain amount of courage required in school leadership these days, which is important. So we are seeing this shift away from passive observation to active engagement and assessment, which in many ways I see as a healthy thing. Ofsted inspectors will not be providing an individual grade for individual lessons now. They will be taking a collective view of the quality of teaching and learning in the school using all of those data points. I wonder how many teachers will actually be asking for grades or for that level of feedback as well, because we can be our own worst enemies sometimes on that front. And of course you want to know how well you've done. I also expect, however, that the teacher unions will be coming to you, if you are, for example, providing individual grades within your performance management structure or something like that, I think you will find increasing challenge on that. Why are you doing this? Ofsted isn't making you do that. And that's another trend that I can see coming across to us, is that Ofsted is pulling back from some of the requirements that it's put forward.